Kurt, another week of Pro Basketball Talk Extra. Can't wait to dive right into it. Let's go with the Western Conference. Suns and Jazz sharing the number 1 seed. Who do you think will take the number 1 seed going into the playoffs?
I really don't know because it's tight. I would normally say the Jazz because they've got a softer schedule the rest of the way. I mean, I know that they've got like Rockets, Thunder, Kings. The Suns have a tougher schedule, but the Suns have just been playing better. They've been beating whoever's in front of them, road, home, doesn't matter. So I guess I'll say the Jazz, again, just because of the softer schedule, and they've been playing pretty well without Donovan Mitchell, but I really feel like it's a coin toss. I really don't know, and I don't think either of them are trying to, because of the play-in, nobody's trying to lose or win to line up a certain matchup anymore.
Yeah, how do you even, if you're a number 1 seed or number 2 seed, you're almost at a disadvantage because you don't know who you're playing, right? Until the very 9th hour. It's like it's almost a disadvantage.
You're going to get more time off, which is the one thing those top 6 seeds like, right? During that play-in tournament, you get now 5 days to rest, which you normally got a couple and you either had to travel or whatever, but you're going to get 5 days off now. That's a long break, especially in this condensed season. The teams are really looking forward to that. But you're right, you don't know who you're preparing for. In theory, you're the 1 seed playing the 8 seed. It shouldn't matter, Corey. If that 8 seed is Golden State, yeah, that might feel a little different.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, you think about like a defensive scheme. I know defense, we talk about all the time. How do you make sure you're preparing for, let's say, the Spurs, right? Or Steph Curry? Those are two different setups.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I mean, it's a slight disadvantage. The flip side of that is you are the 1 seed. You should be able to beat the 8 seed, right? Like you've earned the right to have this. I'm curious if they're going to, adjust this in the future now that LeBron James is complaining about it and everything. I don't know that they are, but I'm curious to see if they tweak this or I don't know. Maybe they'd let them pick which one of the 2 teams they want to face or something, but I don't think it really matters. I think that this thing is here to stay.
Well, let's just play it out. Let's say, one of those teams gets the number 1 seed. Let's look at 7 through 10. You got Portland at 7, Golden State 8, Memphis 9, San Antonio 10 at the current moment. What is the best case scenario for Phoenix or for Utah? And what's the worst case scenario in your mind?
Best case is probably Memphis, right? I think for either of them, only because Memphis's bench is really struggling. Just Justice Winslow and Jaren Jackson Jr. just really haven't found their legs since coming back from injury. DeAnthony Melton, who played so well for most of the season, is just in a slump. So you've got Jaren Jackson Jr. like staring at the rim dunks. It's amazing to watch him, but the depth isn't there. It's still not quite the same playoff tested team. And I think, wouldn't you agree? Like worst case is it's still Golden State. You just
100%.
That's too much, right?
Yeah, Steph Curry's playing on an MVP level. It's unbelievable what he's putting out on the floor right now. And and you never want to count Damian Lillard out. We know that he rises to the occasion. He's Mr. Clutch, right? He's Dame time. So it's a headache, right?
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if we really want to deal with that.
Portland's playing better of late. Like that's something to worry about. Portland the last couple of weeks has started to find their groove, which makes them a lot more dangerous if they catch somebody who's a little banged up.
Well, let's head over to the Eastern Conference now. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the top of the Eastern Conference. We have a similar situation: Philadelphia and Brooklyn neck and neck, and then Milwaukee at 3. What is your idea of who will take the top there? Do you think any recent matchups between, for instance, Milwaukee and Brooklyn matter? The fact that Brooklyn dropped 2 straight, despite 30-plus point performances from their stars, to Milwaukee.
You know who won big in that month? The Milwaukee and Brooklyn series? Sixers. Like Sixers now, I mean, they're 2 up in the loss column on the 1 seed, and they have the softest schedule the rest of the way, like softest schedule in the league the rest of the way. They're going to get the number 1 seed, which is huge for them, right? They're 25-7 at home. Like they're much better at home than they are on the road. Even though there's no fans in the building, it matters to that team for some reason. And the other thing is, like, they get the other 2 teams on the other side of the bracket. So that Brooklyn-Milwaukee series, let them beat each other up in the second round, and we only have to beat one of them. I think that's huge for Philadelphia.
I agree. When I look at Brooklyn, I get terrified. Yeah. That is a team that, at any given moment, Kevin Durant can go for 40, Kyrie can go for 40, and James Harden, we know, is a triple-double machine this year. So Brooklyn just terrifies me generally. And then Milwaukee, I mean, you never want to count out the reigning back-to-back MVP, right?
No.
Giannis is just, I mean, he's a monster. So I'm with you. If they can kind of beat themselves and allow you to say, okay, we only got to deal with a battered and bruised, maybe potentially a 7-game series. You know, they're going to go the distance between those two teams. I mean, we're gonna catch them with, you know, a little. They're gonna be like round 7, 8. You know what I'm saying? A little battered, bruised, maybe a down a couple steps. We're in a very good position to beat them and then face whoever comes out the West. How do you complain if you're Philadelphia?
You don't. And by the way, I'm curious if you're Philadelphia. I feel weird saying this because of all the star power on the Nets, but would you rather face them? Because they don't have an answer for Joel Embiid. They just, DeAndre Jordan can't do it. Claxton's too small. Like, they just don't have the big bodies to throw at them, which they do in Milwaukee. Milwaukee has Brook Lopez, and you know, it's Giannis has got there. And by the way, they have PJ Tucker, who's that kind of, like we've talked about, kind of guy that really can bother Embiid. You might be slightly better off. Can Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle match up with all that wing talent?
I think at the end of the day, you don't tempt fate. You know, I'm a simple guy, Kurt. I'm like, look, you got 3 potential, guys who just, at any given moment, you know, at the top of the league and what they do. I'm not trying to tempt fate in a 7-game series. I think you probably have more leeway with Milwaukee. And if you're also thinking about Joel Embiid, no one can stop Joel. You know, it doesn't matter, like, you know, so I think from his perspective, he's like, it doesn't matter who you line up against. No one can stop me if I'm playing healthy and if I'm at the top of my game. So I don't even think as a player, you're probably not even registering that. Because when he's dominant, he's dominant. It doesn't matter whether it's Bobby Portis Jr. or Claxton. You know, it doesn't really matter.
And I think Milwaukee, out of all this, gains confidence. Yeah, no James Harden was in those games, and be careful taking too much away from them. But you just beat them. Giannis was hitting shots from the outside. He was 4 of 8 from 3 in the first game, and then like hit his first 3 in the next game. First couple threes. When you're rolling like that and you gain confidence against a team, I think it helps you going in, doesn't it? Like you suddenly feel like you can beat this team, even though they're adding, you know, James Harden to the mix. You got to feel pretty good.
Yeah, when we're less than 10 games away from the playoffs, I think that's a huge confidence booster because you're looking at the other side. Think about the Lakers, for instance, who look discombobulated, right? They look very jumbled. That doesn't help your confidence. But if you can beat one of the top teams in the NBA that everyone's kind of like, oh, wow, like if they go on a run, we might be in trouble. You beat them back to back. That definitely helps your confidence. Just understand this is where we're at right now. And like you said, when you add James Harden, it's going to be a different equation for sure. But still, Kyrie and KD both put up crazy performances, right? So you know you can handle a 40-point game from Kevin Durant. You got to be pretty confident about that.
Exactly. I'm with you. That you're counting on your defense anyway. If you're Milwaukee, right? Like your defense is still the backbone of what you do, and you're just saying. The other thing, Drew Holiday looked really good playing against Kyrie in that series. I think you did see in those games the potential of the Bucks. It's just hard to take much away from it because, again, James Harden.
Yeah, one team with a lot of potential, the New York Knicks.
Yeah.
And who knew we'd be sitting here saying the New York Knicks going into the playoffs are sitting at the 4th seed? This is amazing. This is like a shout out back to like the 1970s. Like this is an amazing time to be in New York, where you have Brooklyn and New York, the New York Knicks in the top 4 in the league. In the Eastern Conference. Amazing. So what are your thoughts on this team? Can they actually make a run?
They can make a run to the second round, I think. I think that they're capable of beating not only like if they keep the 4 seed and can line up somebody like Atlanta, yeah, for sure. But beyond that, I think they're capable of beating Miami or Boston, right? Like I think that they can win those kind of series. If they get up against the big 3, yeah, I'm not sold that they can knock any of them off. And it's going to be interesting to see them in the playoffs. They defend so well, and that's going to carry over. But what's plan B on offense when, look, I can scheme and line up my guys and take away Julius Randle? What's plan B? Can RJ Barrett create enough? Can quickly create enough as a rookie? Like, I'm not sure where their offense comes from long term, but yeah, they can absolutely win around there. I'm not counting them out against pretty much anything anymore, man. They've surprised me all year long.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this in the past. Where the top 3 in the East are very, very scary, and then everyone else, it's kind of like who knows what we're gonna get. You know, we might have a Miami situation that peaks through and then goes to the finals. We don't know. And that's what makes the Eastern Conference so interesting, is that at any given moment, someone can emerge. It might be the New York Knicks, but in my mind, New York is still a very young team, right? And I think they're following the lead of Julius Randle. Like, he has had this amazing transformation, and he's brought consistency to them. When I think about the New York Knicks in the past decade, I mean, I don't know if I can think of a star player, franchise player, who's been consistently giving them 28 and 10, right, for 72, 82 games. There's always been injuries or drama, right? This is like the first time I can think of where the New York Knicks are like actually have a star who's there every single night doing the work and not, there's no drama. So it's almost like, man, this is what could happen in New York if we could just do this every night. So I think in that sense, very promising. They play hard, very promising. But they make a lot of mistakes, Kurt. I watched them play, and I'm like, it's a young team mistake. Why would you do that in that scenario? Late in the games, like blowing coverage when you're thinking about like, okay, there's 20 seconds left in the game. How did we leave that guy open? It's just stuff like that where it just doesn't make any sense. Turnovers, unforced errors. I think the Knicks in a 7-game series will probably beat themselves, in the playoffs, just because they're so young. But I got to give a lot of credit to Julius Randle and what he's been able to establish there with that culture.
Yeah, and the fact that we are talking about the Knicks potentially winning a playoff series or being it is, I mean, if you'd gone into the season and said, wait, we're in the playoffs? Like, Knicks fans would have jumped at that. And now we're talking about them, can they win a round? It's amazing. Julius Randle is going to win Most Improved Player this year, deservedly. Thibodeau is going to be in the mix for Coach of the Year. This has been a very good team. And yeah, I still think that there's, I don't know, call it a rite of passage, learning how to win in the NBA, and they're going to have to learn. They'll probably learn some hard lessons in the playoffs, but that's still a team on the right. Everything's going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think this is exactly, we're talking about Atlanta too. Remember mid-season, coach change, try to figure out how do we take the next step. And it seems like they're sitting at 5. They've kind of taken that step forward. So I'm excited to see what they do. But let's look at the very bottom of the playoffs. At 10, the Washington Wizards, who are, I mean, this is like a meteoric rise for them if you really think about it. They were in the dredges of the Eastern Conference all season long. It was almost like they were an afterthought for a lot of the season. And now they've managed to fight their way, claw their way into a playoff race. What are your thoughts on this Wizards team? Can they get in the play-in?
Absolutely. I think they're in the play-in. Not only are they in the play-in, they're dangerous in the play-in. They are the first team we're talking about. We're like, they're the 10 seed, and they could win those 2 games. They could end up in the proper playoffs as the 8 seed. I think it's absolutely possible for them. Partially the difference for them, though, is simply that they got healthy. I mean, for all this they talk, remember, this was a team that was hit so hard by COVID. Not only did they have like a week and a half of games canceled, remember, they couldn't practice. They didn't have enough guys to run a practice for like 2 weeks. And it really hit them hard in the middle of the season. Now you've got Bradley Beal back, Russell Westbrook back. They've really come together. And I'm going to give a quick shout out. The real difference maker on this team, it came also at the trade deadline, Daniel Gafford changes them into a look. When Westbrook and Beal are on the floor together this season, it's basically net neutral. They just play teams about even. You throw Gafford into the mix and they're plus 12.9. Like, because they defend suddenly, because he can protect the rim. He was a steal from Chicago for them.
Isn't that interesting, right? Just a change of scenery can help not only a player bloom, but the entire team bloom.
Yeah.
And as a GM, you're probably thinking, how do I get more Daniel Gaffords? How do you, before that trade, what were your thoughts on Gafford's game? And then I guess after the trade, why has he made such a big difference? I know you mentioned the defensive capabilities, but as GM, how do you even identify that?
I think that he just never really got, I mean, he was a project a little anyway in Chicago, but he never got a chance, right? Because you had Wendell Carter Jr. and Lauri Markkanen and all these bigs that they drafted really high that they had to give a shot at, and they kept giving a chance to. And then the new regime comes in this year, and I think he was just an afterthought, and eventually they go, they trade for Vucevic. And they don't really need him, and they just didn't see him as a guy. He never got the run. He never got the chance. He never got the opportunity. They throw him to a struggling Wizards team who's going to, they lost, remember, Thomas Bryant for the season back in January. They're throwing everybody out there. And this guy got an opportunity in a system that worked. And sometimes, Corey, I think this is true in football. I think this is true in hockey. It's true in everything. Sometimes fit matters almost more than talent. Like, you've got to be put in a situation that plays to your strengths. and he landed in one.
Yeah, when you have Westbrook and Beal both just absolute scoring machines. I mean, Westbrook hit what, 24 assists, 20 rebounds the other night. I mean, it's unbelievable. He can do everything.
Yeah.
But Bradley Beal, last year was second in scoring in the league. This year he's second in scoring in the league. You know, it's almost like we don't need another star. We just need someone who can do their job really well, right? And then you see Gafford's doing that, and it's elevating everyone else to play around them. But yeah, when I think about the Wizards, yes, once again, you never want to count out Russell Westbrook, who can give you 24 assists, 20-something assists on any given night. And you never want to count out Bradley Beal, who's, you know, putting up those crazy numbers. But I'm not convinced yet of the Wizards. I don't know. I've seen this movie before. You know, that's all I got to say. Kurt, I've seen the movie before, and I'm just not convinced. If they get in the play-in, I think that would be a monumental achievement. But I don't know if they can go past the first round.
Yeah, I don't know that they're making any kind of serious run, but I think maybe they could get into play. I got to say this. Remember, they were at the deadline. There was a lot of people like, why aren't they trading Bradley Beal? They're not going anywhere. This is why they didn't trade Bradley Beal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a shot. And all they're saying is you give me a chance, right? It's like,
so you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, Washington, you have a chance. Please show us what you can do. When you're thinking about the play-in, generally, some players have had criticism. They've levied some thoughts, one being LeBron James. What are your thoughts on how players are reacting to the play-in? What do you think about the whole scenario?
First off, I was at that game and on that Zoom with LeBron, and I was a frustrated LeBron, frustrated that he'd come out, frustrated that his ankle was kind of giving him trouble, frustrated that they'd just gotten beat by Toronto, and frustrated that they were in the mix. But that's kind of what suddenly happens. It was the same with Cuban and Luka Doncic, right? Like suddenly this change impacts you, and you're like, wait, this change is awful. It impacts me now, right? I still think it's not going anywhere. I still like it for the league. You know what LeBron and Doncic and Cuban are complaining about is we've got to play at the end of the season. We don't get to rest our guys. There's all this drama. That's what we wanted. We wanted the end of the season to have more meaning, and we got it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There's something on the line. And I think as a fan, it's always that juxtaposition, right? As a fan versus as a player, right? I mean, as a player, it's probably it doesn't seem ideal. Like we talked about before, you don't know who you're playing. You kind of have to play an extra game to get a spot that you already deserve, right? I'm sure there are elements as a player that don't seem fair. But as a league and as a fan, it probably outweighs, just because you're thinking, okay, well, now I get a potential chance to host some playoff games as a franchise. When you think about the money that comes in with that, with a fully open, full capacity arena, that's awesome. The TV deals, that's awesome. As a fan, you actually have a reason to watch the last 8-10 games of the season because you might have a chance. Yeah. We're talking about the Washington Wizards a couple minutes ago. That is a chance. Like now, Washington fans are invested again. And I think right now, Kurt, I'm watching basketball the past few years, but particularly this season, people are trying to figure out ways to keep people engaged because you have the rise of resting players. We had one of the shortest off seasons. So now you're looking at a lot of soft tissue injuries this season. Yeah. So, I mean, stars are out. Really, LeBron was out for since March 20th with the ankle injury. Anthony Davis was out for a month plus too with his injury. So it's like, why watch the Lakers? Are you really watching the Lakers, to watch Alex Caruso and Dennis Schroeder and Marc Gasol every night? Or do you want to see LeBron play? How do you get people invested in those games? Fantasy is one way, but I think the play-in is another, right? I mean, there's something on the line, and Schroeder has to step up. He has to carry the load. So I think in that sense, the players who are they have to understand the bigger picture, right? Like what's best for the league. And I think that the play-in is probably best for the league in the current environment.
I agree with you. I just think ultimately, look, those games are going to get good ratings, those play-in games, because it's what we love about the NCAA tournament, right? Like it's one and done, or the NFL playoffs or whatever. There's no look. If the 12 seed plays the 4 seed in the NCAA tournament in a best of 7, the 4 seed's winning, right? Like, but one game, one night, one guy gets hot from 3, or you get the late mistakes, and it changes. That's what you love about the tournament. That's what's going to be fun about these play-in games. Yeah, Washington can upset people. Yes, the Spurs are going to have a real chance. Like teams are throwing you a Spurs one. But I mean, they're going to have a real chance, right? Like you get an opportunity. Popovich is always good at having his teams wired for these kind of moments. Like that's not only are the fans of those teams going to tune in, you and I and people watching this as just sports fans are going to tune in because that's the kind of drama we crave.
Yeah, I mean, my Spurs jersey is being dusted as we speak. I'm ready. But yeah, I think when you think about any other sports, like, do you watch, soccer all the time, or do you just watch, the Champions League semifinals?
Yeah.
Like, do you watch the football, or do you just hop in for the wild card games? When do you watch a league? And I think this is a great way to create drama just for the casual sports fan, not just the diehard basketball fan who has 8 rosters and 3 different fantasy leagues. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not just for us. It's for people who are like, oh, wow, this game matters, and it's live television. I'd like to watch it and see who rises to the occasion. But when you look at one team that could rise to the occasion, you're looking at Damian Lillard and his Portland Trailblazers. What are your thoughts? Do you think that they have a chance here? I know they're sitting at 7, but do you think that they can push that last little bit over, maybe overtake the Lakers and sit at 6?
Well, the Lakers are really stumbling. I mean, they're going to miss LeBron for the big game between Portland and LA on Friday night. The Lakers, by the way, also without, as you mentioned, how important he was. They're without Dennis Schroeder now, probably right up until the start of the playoffs because of health and safety protocols. That's going to hurt them. Like, that's the secondary shot creator they need. Anthony Davis has looked a lot better against Denver, but he's still coming back from injury. I think Portland could sneak up and pass them. I think the Lakers in the 7th seed, as much as LeBron hates that idea, is legitimately very possible now. And part of it is that, yeah, they've got Damian Lillard and CJ. And don't sleep, by the way, on Carmelo Anthony putting up like 16 points a game the last month and playing well. But the other real key, I think, look, they've been awful defensively this year, right? Just terrible defensively, except when Yusuf Nurkic is on the floor. When they get him back, they're an above average, even borderline top 10 type of defense in the NBA. He makes that big a difference as a quality drop back center and big man in the paint. And suddenly, if you put Lillard and McCollum and all that offensive firepower, and you can have a pretty good defense, yeah, suddenly you're dangerous.
Yeah, I think they're dangerous just generally because of, you never know. It seems like they will some of those victories in, but, you don't want to always have to play with your back against the wall. It'd be nice to kind of win with some wiggle room, right? And I think one thing that is interesting about this Portland team is, we keep saying, oh, when are they going to turn the corner? Or, yeah, like, Nurkic and Zach Collins, like when they get these guys back, or when they get healthy, or when they do this, or so I think it's interesting. It's, we're at the last little bit of the season here, and Portland, I feel like, just needs to learn, what is the identity of our team? What are we putting out there on the floor going into playoffs? Just, as a fan, I'm sitting here and I can think of a lot of excuses. They didn't have CJ for a long time. Started off the season strong, but they didn't, you didn't have their bigs for a long time. People had to step up. So, but none of that matters when it's the play-in game or round 1 playoffs. Players got to play. And it doesn't matter what happened in the past, 72, 82 games, in the sense of we had excuses why our chemistry wasn't ready. All of those kind of go out the window. It's win or go home. So I think in that sense, I just want to know, what does a playoff Portland team look like? Does that make sense, Kurt?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they come together now with all this pressure on them. And look, at best, they're going to get up to the 6th seed, and they're going to get somebody like Denver or the Clippers in the first round. Like, there's not going to be an easy route for them, no matter what happens. They're going to be challenged from the start, and we'll see if they're really up to it. And if they're not, it could be an interesting offseason in Portland. If you've got Damian Lillard at your peak and you keep getting bounced in the first round, you have some soul searching to do.